Up next, we have another exciting session brought to you this afternoon. This session will be presented by Pentera on the topic of continuous security validation at the heart of CTEM. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Jeric Lim, Channel Director of APAC Pentera.
When you assume there's a spare tire in your trunk because it's a rented car, then it's not.
So good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for taking time to listen to my presentation. So I have this opening introduction for you, ladies and gentlemen, right? Is to give you an idea on what do we do on our daily lives, right? We tend to assume on everything that we do, right? Doesn't matter if it's in cybersecurity or doesn't matter if it's our daily lives, right? We assume that we are always in a clean of health because we always eat things healthily. So that's one of the things that we always tend to forget. We assume a lot of things, right? And that's why in this particular topic, we talk about continuous validation at the heart of the CTEM. So a little bit about myself. I've always been in cybersecurity for more than 15 years, right? I've always been in the blue side of things. And then we always assume from these beautiful vendors all here, they all talk about, hey, get some technology is going to protect you from malicious activities and whatnot. But that's really an assumption basis if you don't really validate those, right? Those claims, you don't test it, you don't actually get to experience if the solution is protecting you or not, right? So when I heard about this term from Gartner, it just came out in 2021, when I heard about the term CTEM, this really intrigued me because what they actually have in mind is to talk about a framework, right? So what does the framework talk about? It's really to ask you to continuously validate, right? Testing and testing over and over again. You have the prioritization, and of course, it helps you to mitigate certain threats as well. So it focuses on real-time visibility is one of the key things that it does, and of course, making sure you have the consistency as it progresses. Okay? So one of the key things I want to share with you as well is really a statistics. As you can see here, cybersecurity spending in 2025 is projected to be at $200 billion. But look at the economy of cyber crimes. It's a $10 trillion economy. So what that basically means is we are spending this amount, but yet we are up against an infinite resource from the threat terrorists, right? Where they can actually keep on have constant resources and cheap resources from GPTs as well to give you an attack that you never thought it may exist. Okay? So we definitely need to evolve in the way that we approach cybersecurity. All the time, we are all talking about, hey, we need to look at what the blue team is known for, right? Protecting us, how the attackers will behave. We need to protect them against that. But try to look at it from a different approach, right? We look at it from exposure perspective. If you have the lens of an attacker, you would probably be able to protect yourself even better, right? So the fundamental of things would be as such. In simple terms, when we talk about cybersecurity, we always talk about patching, right? All of you heard about this term. But there's this thing called patchable vulnerabilities and non-patchable vulnerabilities. And what does that actually equate, right? Patchable is really just an update, okay? And then those non-patchable ones, you need to mitigate it. How do you actually mitigate those risks? It's really an art, okay? Because you're always up against the cybersecurity practitioner team versus the operational team. So these guys usually, they don't gel with each other. And if you see this particular research done by Gartner, it says non-patchable attack surface will account for more than 50% of your attack surface by 2026, okay? And that's really a big number because things will start to get messed up into the way that we tend to do things. All along, we've been trying to patch things and get things moving along to make sure that, hey, things are moving in proper, right? We pass the audits and whatnot. But another thing that we tend to forget a lot is credentials, right? Leaked credentials. I'm sure you've seen it on the news time and time again. Websites, publishing your credentials, companies being hacked, all the credentials are being leaked online. This is a massive problem. Why is that so? As you can see, up to 65% of people reuse their credentials, okay? I'm sure you have somebody that you know is using the same passwords over and over again on different websites. And if their website has been breached, it's not a fault of the person, right? It's just so happened that it was being breached and the credentials were being leaked out. And And unsuspectingly, he used the same credentials on the corporate network. And that by itself, right, posed a risk to the environment. So a quick refresh about what we spoke about since the beginning is the focus must now change into focusing on, exposure management instead of just looking at previously a vulnerability-centric type of management. This is a really ongoing process for accounting and reducing your IT risk, okay? Especially important in the era of AI, right? When AI is talking about automation, when they talk about, attacking you all the time, you need to be ready for it. So that's where, there is this rise in the seminar this whole week, right? We've been hearing some vendors are talking about, exposure management. This is the trend that is really coming in, and what Gartner actually mentioned as well. This is something that's not difficult to achieve, and in fact, most of the clients today already have part of what we do. Things like, your attack surface, right? Your internal, external. Simply put it, you're already validating your infrastructure at least once a year by doing your annual pen testing, right? That's the baseline that you should be doing. But as we change, as evolution of security has changed, once a year is no longer enough. You need to do it continuously, right? And that's where, Gartner actually had this part here. We talk about validation, okay? This is the part that's extremely important because the investment that you put in place, you must have an ROI, right? So that you can gather more and you talk to the management, hey, these tools are really helping us in our security posture. But how do you know if you don't test it, right? So here's a very cute cartoon that we actually had. So this CISO here is, hey, we have spent so much money, right? We bought solutions for password policies. We bought solutions for MFA, SIEM, EDR, AV. And guess what? He still have a pot of gold here as a just-in-case budget, okay? Just in case, if everything fails, all the things that we have purchased, if everything fails, I still have a pool of money to pay for ransom, okay? So that's something that, a lot of organizations have an issue today. But what happens, right, if you actually adopt an automated security validation way, okay? When you have a solution similar like us, it constantly tests your controls, constantly tests every single time, when certain things change, you add on new machines, you add on new nodes, you change policies, consistently test it, you will actually fortify your security posture, right? Making sure that things are being used as it should. So over time and time again, the posture will only get better and better. Because as you discover something, you fix. You discover something, you fix. Okay, that's really, really important. And one of the 5 pillars that we want to talk about today, right, and this is really the important part of this presentation, is to change your mindset, okay, into how you should be adopting a automated security validation. There's 5 biggest pillars here, and I'll let you read about it. But the most important one is really the changing the mindset into thinking by graphs, okay? Because today, most of us are thinking in a linear way, a straight line, right? Basically, what this means, and a very well-respected gentleman called John Lombard from Microsoft, he says that defenders think in lists, okay? What does he mean by that? Is, as a defender, we always have a scheduled way of doing things. And how do I put it? I'll put it into illustration, right? So as all the security guys or the operations guys, when they operate, they will definitely work with, the terminology that everybody hears about, right? You cannot protect what you can't see, right? And when that happens, what do? They will prioritize. Okay, this is my critical assets, right? Prioritize it. This is my critical assets. The next thing that they do is, I will scan for vulnerability, correct? When I scan for the vulnerability, I know what's the problem. Then next, I'll scan for the credentials, and then I'll check the policies, and then is there any AV or EDR installed or not? That is the common baselining of all the organizations that we work with today, right? So if you think about it, if the attacker also knows about this, they will also follow the same structure to attack you, right? But don't forget, remember I said on the earlier slide, there is this thing called credentials, right? It's on the rise, it's getting more and more prevalent. If the attacker actually have the capabilities of getting some credentials from the dark web or the deep web or whatever web, they can actually attack you from there. So they no longer follow the list that we think, right? Whatever you can see, whatever you can protect, it all goes away. It goes from a different angle. They will start their attack through the identity that they have gathered, and they will try to hit their ways inside. through any machines that they can find, right? If you are into this field, you probably will also understand when you do pen testing, it's all about, giving the scope of work to the pen tester, telling the pen tester what to do. Think about it, if you're a hacker, will you be following that suite of scope of work? The hacker will just get their hands on anything they can find and will just breach you into whatever ways that they could. So we need to start to think like an attacker and move in a graph instead of a list, all right? The next thing here is, the pillar number 2 is to talk about you need to automate your tests, right? Why do you need to automate your tests? It's simply because the attackers are already using an automated attack. As humans, we do a manual validation, right? How do we do it? Probably a monthly patch cycle, certain things that we do it on a monthly basis. But as you can see from these 4 examples here, these are prominent APT groups, right? And of course, these are the guys also use a lot of scripts, okay, to inject all the ransomwares that they need to do and whatever not. And it's all done automatically without any form of human intervention. But we today is still not doing it, okay? And that's where, a technology like ours, we follow religiously on the MITRE ATT&CK, all right? Following what the MITRE ATT&CK framework would look like, it starts with your network reconnaissance, you talk about the VA, and the list goes on, okay? So it actually mimics how an ethical hacker would be doing. So that's really the cool part about what we do, is that we perform and act as a red teamer, but done in a safe and ethical way, okay? That's very important. You need to understand that part, right? So on part number 3, we talk about validate everything. Validation of everything is extremely important today, right? Why? Because of all the technologies that you have bought today, right? As you can see here, we are doing this thing called defense in depth, right? It was a very popular term a couple of years ago. You talk about your defense in depth, you talk about firewalls, and then you move to the EDR, and it goes on and goes on, right? But what we are not doing today is we don't really validate in depth, correct? We only do a pen test. And how do we do the pen test? It's on the critical server. There are so many other engines out there that's left untouched. And that is why we need to match it up, right? Test every single layer. Doesn't matter if it's a firewall, doesn't matter if it's NDR, doesn't matter if it's the endpoint. If you want to test the endpoint, you want to make sure when you inject a ransomware inside, will your EDR flag out? Okay, that's the key things that you need to test. Do they react to you, right? Or if you need to test your SOC, does the SOC know how to respond? Does the SOC know what to do? That's also another thing you need to test, right? And pillar number 4 is to test continuously. I cannot emphasize this enough, simply because the attackers are attacking you consistently, okay? So, good case in point, if you look at it, right, 2024 just passed not so long ago. So what usually a company will do, they will definitely test it, right? Because they need to pass their audit. They will make sure that this looks good. The risk posture goes down, right? So everything looks good, we submit. But fast forward into 2025, things will go down and then you start to patch again. So it's really a cycle that you are doing, right? If you think about, if you think about what it should be done, okay? If you do a continuous testing, your risk posture suddenly becomes tolerable, because now you're consistently, making sure whatever you uncovered, you will fix it. And this is how a typical Pentera's customer is using our solution today, right? As you can see, in this calendar of events, there's a lot of tests they can be doing. So just take a simple example, right? In January, they did a black box test, okay? And then in February, they do it for the remediation, and then March, they do it again, and so on and so forth. But don't forget, there's so many types of different attacks, right? Pentera can run them all for you, right? Penetration the cloud. We can run, password assessments. We can run, external attacks management. We can do different types of attacks to make sure that you are constantly being protected holistically, okay? Doesn't matter if the attack is from the outside or the inside, we will be able to cover them pretty much, okay? And the last part here is to really use the investments that you put in place, the threat intelligence, right? So using threat intelligence that we gathered, of course, we can also ingest what you have. If you have certain vendors' threat intelligence, you're free to pump it into Pentera. We'll be able to run those threat intel for you as well. It can be used by different products of ours, right? From the external facing assets, okay? We will be able to check, hey, can this set of credentials work on your environment? Or when we have it in your internal asset, will this set of credentials give you access into certain machines that you probably wouldn't even know? All right? So that's a very important part about what we deliver to the market today, right? Giving you a insight and asking you to test religiously, testing continuously to find out what is really happening, okay, at any point in time. So that's why the topic that I chose today is really talking about the validation at the heart of CTEM, whereby you really need to validate everything. Don't just take everything with an assumption, right? I think is one of the killers in IT security, right? Because everything is, I think, oh, this is protected. We are protected. We have patched this. We have done that. But we always have to have a confirmation in that part, all right? So, lastly, you know, your exposure management strategy is really as good as your security validation capabilities. This is extremely true, and I cannot emphasize this enough. Okay? So, long story short, you know, I have this picture with me here. This is really interesting. Why? Because, as you can see from this picture here, he has his spare tire, but unfortunately, this tire cannot be used when he needs it. Why? Because he's just doing security for compliance. He's not really focusing on fixing what matters most, all right? And that's where we would like to share with you and tell you and guide you where to look for the source of the attack, and from the source, how do you fix certain problems? Rather than, you know, flagging up tons and tons of vulnerabilities that you probably wouldn't have the time to fix, we go directly to the source. Okay? So with this, I end my presentation. If there's any question, I'll be happy to take. If not, you know, I'll be at my booth, happy to have a conversation. And then if you can come by, we actually have some, you know, QR scanning game. If you can get it, you can actually exchange it for the posters that we have. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jeric Lim, Channel Director, APAC for Pentera. That was such a great insights. Once again, please help us fill in the QR code on screen and share with you your thoughts. สำหรับเซสชันจากคุณเจริกลิมนะคะจาก Pentera ค่ะก็ได้เล่าให้เราฟังนะคะถึงวิธีการจัดการกับ Cyber Threats นะคะที่เรียกได้ว่าเกิดขึ้นอย่างต่อเนื่องเลยนะคะหรือว่า Continuous Threats Exposure Management นั่นเองนะคะซึ่งวิธีการค่ะก็มี5อย่างนะคะที่ทางคุณเจริกค่ะได้เล่าให้เราฟังนะคะเริ่มจากติงกราฟนะคะต่อด้วยการ Automate Test นะคะเพราะว่าAttacker นะคะก็จะมีการ Automate Attackนะคะเพราะฉะนั้นคนที่จะเป็นคนโดน attack นะคะก็จะต้องมีการ automate validation ด้วยนะคะข้อ3นะคะ validate everything ค่ะเพื่อให้เกิด defense in depth นะคะแล้วก็มีการ test นะคะทดสอบทุก layer ค่ะนอกจากนี้นะคะก็ยังควรที่จะต้องเทสอย่างต่อเนื่องนะคะหรือ continuously นั่นเองค่ะเพราะว่าปัจจุบันนะคะมี attack เยอะมากนะคะทำให้จะต้องมีการเทสอย่างหลายตัวนะคะแล้วก็บ่อยครั้งขึ้นนะคะโดยคุณเจริกค่ะได้โชว์ให้ดูนะคะถึงโซลูชันของ Pentera นะคะที่ทำการเทสว่ามีหลากหลายโซลูชันมากๆเลยนะคะและทำการเทสได้หลายๆตัวค่ะเพราะว่าปัจจุบัน attacker ก็ใช้ความถี่นะคะที่มากขึ้นค่ะแล้วก็มีวิธีการ attack หลายแบบมากขึ้นค่ะถ้าเราไม่มีการทำเทสแบบต่อเนื่องนะคะเราจะไม่สามารถทำได้อย่างปลอดภัยนะคะและสุดท้ายนะคะ threat intelligence ค่ะก็เป็นอีกหนึ่งสิ่งสำคัญค่ะ Our next session will start and resume at 3:30 p.m. So we will have a quick break before we resume for our last and final highlights of the day. I will see you all here for the Inside the Minds of a Hacker, unveiling the risk of identity-based cyber attack by Delinea. Hope to see you soon in 15 minutes.